What if the future of a nation could fit inside 16 suitcases? What if those suitcases weren't just bags, but time bombs, ticking, silent, waiting to explode with truth? And what if the man who stopped them was someone the world underestimated? Young soldier, a quiet revolutionary, a reluctant hero. His name is Ibrahim Traore. And on one star-filled night in the heart of Africa, he did something no one else dared to do. He intercepted a plane, not a fighter jet, not a military aircraft, but a sleek diplomatic jet with engines humming, a destination logged, and 16 suitcases hidden beneath layers of immunity. No one expected the truth to be inside those bags. No one expected what would happen next. This is the story of how one man, armed not with weapons, but with courage and a sharp eye for justice, unraveled a decades-old operation spanning continents, governments, and secrets. A true undercover tale. A tale that begins not in a battlefield, but in the shadows of an airport lounge. It was just past midnight. Ouagadougou Airport was supposed to be quiet. A few security guards, maybe a cleaner or two. Silence and routine. But not this night. This night, every corner of the airport was locked down. Special units in red berets stood like statues. Armored vehicles circled a French diplomatic jet like vultures. Inside the VIP terminal, tension thickened the air, fogged up windows, sweaty palms, eyes darting, and at the center of it all, Traore sat at a long, polished table, calm, focused, watching. Across from him, French Ambassador Jacques Dubois fidgeted in his seat. His expensive suit clung to him like guilt. Sweat trickled down his neck. His hands couldn't stay still. He tried to speak. "Mr. President, this must be a misunderstanding. Diplomatic immunity." But Traore raised his hand. No anger, just clarity. Immunity, he said, is not a license to rob a nation. And with that, the first suitcase was brought to the table, sealed, heavy, marked with diplomatic tape. The locks were opened, the lid lifted. Silence, then gasps. Inside, neat stacks of euro banknotes, bundle after bundle, each marked by the French Central. Banked up on $1 million, just the first suitcase. The room shifted. The air changed. Everyone was now leaning in because the question wasn't just how much. It was why. How long? Who else knew? This wasn't a police search. It was an autopsy of a broken system. And suitcase by suitcase, Traore was about to lay bare everything. He wasn't just uncovering gold. He was uncovering ghosts, stories, deals, made in darkness. 16 suitcases, each one a chapter, each one a secret the world was never meant to see. And tonight, with the cameras off and the world asleep, a young African leader was pulling the curtain back. This wasn't just about gold. It wasn't even just about power. It was about reclaiming dignity. It was about a people finally waking up. So if you're listening now and you're thinking, this sounds like a movie, it's not. This happened. This is happening. And it all started with 16 suitcases and a man who dared to ask, whose future are we really flying away with? Let me tell you what was inside those bags, because the world has a right to know. Suitcase by suitcase, truth by truth, Africa's story is being rewritten. Right now. In real time. Stay with me, because this story changes everything. Midnight in Ouagadougou usually meant stillness, the kind of silence you can almost touch, an airport barely awake, just the hum of the air conditioning, the distant shuffle of a janitor's mop, a couple of sleepy guards blinking away boredom. But this night was nothing like usual. This night, the silence had been replaced by strategy. Every hallway, every terminal was under silent control. Traore's elite red beret soldiers had taken positions with silent precision, not to wage war, but to stop a theft so large it could bleed a country dry. Outside, a diplomatic jet sat on the tarmac, its engines still running, its pilot waiting for clearance that would never come. It looked like any other jet. But what lay inside made it different. What it carried wasn't just diplomatic cargo. It was a nation's stolen bloodline, packed tight into 16 sealed containers. Inside the airport's VIP terminal, the tension was sharper than the cold night air. Windows fogged up. Security staff leaned closer than usual. Eyes were everywhere. The room itself was almost ceremonial. A polished table, a few leather chairs, a large map of Burkina Faso hanging on. The wall as if silently watching the evening unfold. And at the heart of it all sat Traore. He wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. His presence was the loudest thing in the room, calm but commanding. Young, but with the gravity of generations behind his eyes. Across from him sat Jacques Dubois, the French ambassador. His expression didn't match his title. This wasn't diplomacy anymore. This was survival. The suitcases hadn't been touched yet. But their presence was undeniable, lined up like soldiers, each one daring someone to open it. Each minute that passed felt like an hour. Whispers danced at the edges of the room. No one wanted to speak first. No one wanted to say the wrong thing. Then came the order, one word from Traore. Open! Soldiers moved quickly but with care. The first suitcase lifted onto the table landed with a dull thud. It was more than just weight. It was what it represented. The beginning of the end, or the end of a beginning. As locks clicked and latches turned, the people in that room braced themselves, not for an explosion, but for exposure. And outside, the city slept, unaware that within their airport walls, a secret long buried was about to be revealed. The night Ouagadougou refused to sleep. The night Africa opened its eyes. In a room charged with tension, faces can speak louder than words. And tonight, the faces in that VIP terminal told stories of fear, of resistance, of secrets about to break free. At the head of the table sat Ibrahim Traore, not in a military uniform, not in ceremonial robes, but in something simple, unassuming, because real power doesn't need decoration. He didn't need to raise his voice. His silence had already commanded the room. He was young, barely into his 30s, but his presence had weight, like a storm cloud before the rain. Across. From him sat Jacques Dubois, French ambassador to Burkina Faso. His tailored suit had lost its confidence. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He shifted in his seat, his eyes flitting around the room, searching for a crack in this fortress of judgment. He tried diplomacy. He tried formality. Mr. President, there must be a misunderstanding. But his words rang hollow, too rehearsed, too late. Justice Minister Aminata Traore, sharp as a blade, interrupted him before he could go on. Diplomatic cargo, she said, is protected only when it's clean, not when it hides crimes. To her left, Colonel Madou Cabaret, the nation's top intelligence chief, rested a thick black folder on the table. Inside it, photos, times, names, movements, receipts of betrayal. He didn't need to speak. He simply opened the folder and laid out the timeline. 10:47 p.m., 3 vehicles arrive from the French embassy. 16 suitcases are loaded onto the jet. 38, Ambassador Dubois enters this room. 45, jet requests takeoff. Dubois shifted again. His lips parted, but no words came. His immunity was a thin veil now, and everyone could see through it. The airport director, Ousmane Dio, stood at the far end. His job had always been routine, flights, schedules, paperwork, but tonight he was a witness to history, and it weighed heavy. To his right sat Aminata, her eyes never leaving Dubois. She was the moral compass of the group, and tonight that compass pointed due north. They all knew the game had changed. They weren't just diplomats or ministers tonight. They were guardians of a truth that had been buried for decades. Each person in that room had a role. Each had something to lose, but more importantly, something far greater to protect. As the first suitcase opened, they leaned in not just out of curiosity, but out of duty. The contents would shock them, but the faces said more than the gold ever could. It was the face of Traore that lingered the longest, unblinking, unflinching. A leader who came not to negotiate, but to expose. A man ready to show the world that under the masks of power the truth still breathes, and it was finally time to let it speak. The suitcase hit the table with a thud, not loud but heavy. heavy with implication, heavy with history. A soldier leaned in, clicked open the latches, raised the lid slowly, as if peeling back a secret. The room went still. Even the sound of breathing seemed to stop. Inside, a wall of cash. Perfect stacks of crisp euro notes, organized like bricks in a vault, each banded and sealed with the insignia of the French central bank. No one spoke, because what could you say when €1,000,000 just appeared? In front of you? Justice Minister Aminata stepped forward. She didn't touch the money, she didn't have to. This isn't aid, this isn't trade, this is theft. Next to the cash compartment, a smaller side latch was unfastened. The soldier opened it, this time metal. Glinted under the fluorescent light. Gold bars, heavy stamped, marked with the crest of Burkina. Faso it was the country's gold, its soul, pulled from deep in the earth by hands that earned $5 a day, now tucked neatly into a suitcase marked diplomatic cargo. Traore stepped forward. He didn't touch the gold either. He simply looked, then looked up. "How many of these suitcases look like this?" he asked. No one answered, but the silence said everything. Colonel Cabaret scribbled notes, photographed the seals, labeled every detail. "This is evidence now," he said, "not just contraband." Dubois cleared his throat, attempted again to justify. "This must be a mistake. Surely embassy staff—" "Don't!" Aminata snapped. "Don't insult us with half-truths. The gold was real. The money was real. And now, so was the reckoning. The first suitcase was just a glimpse, a whisper of what lay ahead." But it was enough. Enough to shift the air in the room, because this wasn't a crime scene anymore. It was a revelation. One down, 15 to go, and with each one, the weight of silence grew lighter, because the truth was finally being unpacked. The second suitcase arrived with no less weight, but this one didn't glisten with gold. This one burned with information. Colonel Cabaret flipped the latches open. His gloved hands slowly raised the lid. Inside, paper, documents, dozens of folders, stacked tight. He pulled one, held it up to the UV scanner. Invisible ink lit up like stars across a midnight sky. "These are originals," he said, "not photocopies, not duplicates, original state documents. Mining maps, land rights, uranium zones not yet public, even oil fields that only 5 people in the entire country were supposed to know about." Cabaret turned to Traore, his eyes wide. "You me, the energy minister, the chief of staff, and—" He stopped, stared at one of the names printed on the file. "Pascal Urago," Traore finished for him. "The director of geology." "He's been bought," Dio whispered from the corner. The room felt colder. This wasn't just about stolen minerals. This was strategic intelligence, and someone inside was feeding it to the outside. Aminata stepped closer. These maps alone, if sold to the right foreign companies, would shift billions. They'd buy land early, snatch contracts, position themselves before tenders are even announced. Another suitcase was opened. The third, this one held photos, stacks and stacks of them, glossy dated, time-stamped. Cabaret spread them across the table like a deck of scandals. "Minister Sawado at a Paris nightclub," he pointed, "with French arms dealers. General Cow at a Geneva bank. A briefcase in his hand. Money, always money. Governor Zongrana's wife, shopping on the Champs-Élysées, paid for by a mining conglomerate." Faces stared back at them from the photos, smiling, oblivious, compromised. One after another, one lie after another truth. What were these meant for? Traore asked. His voice was calm, but his eyes were ice. "Blackmail," said Cabaret. His voice was flat. Everyone knew it. No one denied it. The suitcases weren't just moving wealth. They were moving leverage, control. They weren't smuggling just gold. They were smuggling power. As the third suitcase was sealed again, the weight of what had been seen lingered. No alarms had rung, no guns had fired. But make no mistake, this was war. And tonight, the truth had fired the first shot. The fourth suitcase was darker, not just in color but in intent. When it opened, no one leaned in, they stepped back. Inside, a maze of wires, tiny lenses, coiled cables, and sleek black boxes. spy gear, top-grade, listening devices that could fit into a pen-cameras smaller than a button, signal jammers, frequency scanners. Cabaret picked one up carefully. He turned it over and frowned. "This has the NSA logo on it." Everyone looked up. "American tech," Aminata asked. "Shared with NATO allies," Traore said, "but used here, in Africa, against us." This wasn't surveillance for security, it was surveillance for sabotage. Everything. Needed to record a leader, to spy on their families, to blackmail a nation. Then came the fifth suitcase. This one looked ordinary, until it opened. Fake. IDs, dozens of them. Passports, driver's licenses, press credentials, NGO observer badges, different names, but same faces. Dio picked up 3. "This one was here last week, said he was a journalist." Aminata added, "He interviewed Minister Sawado." Cabaret laid the 3 side by side. Jean-Pierre Martin, François Dubois, Michel Bernard. Different professions, same operative. They were everywhere, Traore said. Watching, recording, infiltrating. Then the 6th suitcase. When it opened, everyone froze, not from fear, from disbelief. Documents .labeled .stamped. Military documents .deployment strategies, defense infrastructure, personnel rosters, even weak points. "This came from the General Staff's vault," Cabaret muttered. "Only 3 people have access." Traore looked away toward the window. Then he said, "You forgot someone." "Mariam." "The cleaning lady?" Dio asked, surprised. "She's been there 20 years, invisible, loyal. But she sees everything, hears everything, and this time she spoke." The room went quiet again, not from shock, but from respect. They realized the people who seem smallest sometimes carry the biggest truths. 3. More suitcases. 3 new battlefields, information, identity, and betrayal. The enemy wasn't just foreign, it was also familiar. Inside their halls, inside their homes, and Traore had just cracked the code. The 7th suitcase was thick, not from weight, but volume. So many currencies, so many choices. Dollars, euros, pounds. Even Chinese yuan. Bribes had no borders, only preferences. Each bundle labeled with initials. Each envelope marked with dates. "This is a bribery pool," Aminata said. "Payments in any flavor they wanted. From ministers to mayors, from officials to their aides. If power could be bought, it had a price in this suitcase." Then came the 8th. Luxury, wrapped in velvet, gifts with golden, ribbons, high-end watches, diamond-studded pens, designer handbags. Each had a tag, a name, a note. For Minister Traore, a token of friendship. To General Fando's wife, with gratitude. For the governor's son, congratulations. They weren't just bribing leaders, they were buying families, sons, daughters, wives, all woven into the network of control. The greed wasn't limited to positions, it spread to bloodlines. Traore looked over the gifts. He didn't touch them. He didn't speak. But the room felt his silence, like a warning. Then came the 9th. It didn't. Looked dangerous, no weapons, no wires, just files. Personal files, photos, audio recordings, medical reports, and one folder, marked with Traore's name. He opened it slowly. His last checkup results, private conversations, even transcripts from a top-secret security briefing held just days ago. "We swept that room," Cabaret muttered. "No devices." "Maybe not devices," Traore said, "but maybe a person." Eyes shifted around the room. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Only 3 had been in that meeting, and 1 had left early. A phone call, they'd said. Now it seemed that call was to someone else entirely. It wasn't just about bribes anymore. It was about infiltration, surveillance so complete it had reached into a president's lungs and whispered back to foreign ears. 3 suitcases. 3 truths. Loyalty could be bought, family could be used, and privacy was already gone. The 10th suitcase wasn't flashy. It looked like something from a geology lab, but what it contained could shift the future of nations, reports, research, years of analysis, soil studies, water maps, geological data from universities and research centers. It was knowledge, but not just any knowledge. It was Burkina Faso's hidden blueprint. These were never meant to leave the country, Aminata said. This is how they win before the competition even starts. Foreign companies could use this data to stake claims, bid on resources, and write deals as if they had discovered the gold themselves. It was exploitation in the form of early access. Then came the 11th suitcase, and suddenly it felt like a theater. Inside, brochures, leaflets, and polished video clips. Professional footage, well-lit, well-edited. Traore pulled out a file, a headline. Read a new future for Burkina Faso. The face on the pamphlet, Laurent Compere, a name they hadn't spoken since the failed coup of 2019. We thought he was dead, Cabaret whispered. Apparently not, Aminata replied. He's alive and being prepped for a return. The videos confirmed it. High quality. Production studio lighting. And in the background the Eiffel Tower. Filmed in Paris, Traore said. Funded by those who still think we're a colony. The suitcase wasn't just propaganda. It was a campaign, a plan to reinstall a puppet. And then came Suitcase 12, smaller than the rest, but colder, deadlier. Glass bottles, powdered packets, capsules, each one labeled, each one coded. Cabaret read aloud. Simulates a heart attack, mimics a stroke, appears as food poisoning, assassination kits. Who were they meant for? Dio asked. No one answered, but everyone looked at Traore. He stared at the suitcase, then at Dubois. Still think this was just cargo. 3 suitcases. One message. First control the land, then control the narrative. And if all else fails, erase the resistance. The silence in the room wasn't fear anymore. It was fury. The 13th suitcase was heavier than it looked, but not because of gold, because of information. When it opened, inside were hard drives, USB sticks, CDs, technology, data, backup. Abdul Lay, a cyber intelligence expert, was called in immediately. He plugged in one drive, browsed in silence, then looked up. Mr. President, this isn't just any data. It's everything. Everyone stared. Everything, Aminata asked. Our government systems, banking infrastructure, telecoms, military servers, power grids, backed up here and protected with master passwords. Abdul paused. Whoever controls this set can shut us down in hours. A cyber weapon, a digital noose. And it had been quietly flown out of the country. This wasn't espionage anymore. It was sabotage in waiting. Then came the 14th suitcase. It held papers, official-looking, thick with legal language, oil and gas. Agreements, draft signatures. Aminata scanned one page, then slammed it on the table. 80% of our oil would go to them. We get 20 for 50 years. Cabaret picked up another. His face went pale. That's your signature, President. Traore looked down. It was perfect. A forged contract, signed in his name, giving away the nation's resources. They weren't just stealing from us, he said softly. They were stealing our future. Then Suitcase 15, the darkest yet. Lists, pages, and pages, names, teachers, journalists, judges, union leaders. Next to each name a code K to be killed, T to be tracked, C to be silenced, E to be exiled. What about O? Cabaret asked. Aminata counted. 47 names. She looked up. A pose. She flipped the page. Traore's name was at the top. The message was clear. Eliminate the voices and the silence will make it easy. 3 more suitcases, each one cutting deeper. Power wasn't just stolen. It was defended with digital chains, forged, signatures and hit lists. Now only one suitcase remained, and everyone knew it would be the most dangerous of all. The 16th suitcase sat alone, unassuming. A plain black case, not larger than a carry-on, but every eye in the room was locked onto it. Traore stood still for a moment, then walked toward it. He didn't signal anyone. He opened it himself. The clicks of the latches sounded like gunshots in the silent room. He lifted the lid. Inside, a single file, thick, heavy, black cover, gold lettering, Operation Sankara. A collective breath was held. Traore opened the file, flipped past the first page, then stopped. Date, October 15, 1987. The day Thomas Sankara was killed. Objective: eliminate Sankara. Install pro-Western leadership. Method: armed assault, palace infiltration. 12 confirmed casualties. Result: success. Blaise Compaoré assumed control. French interests secured. The room went still. Cabaret leaned. Closer. He couldn't look away. Then came the second half of the file. Phase 2, 2023-2024. Target: Ibrahim Traore. Objective: disrupt governance, reinstall control, neutralize leadership. Strategy: economic pressure, cyber infiltration, political blackmail, assassination if required. Budget: 50 million euros. Command: approved in Paris. Partners listed: DGSE. External liaisons, regional assets, and at the bottom a timeline. It began 6 months ago. It ended next month. Aminata whispered, "They had a calendar for your death." Traore didn't speak. He just turned the pages. Photos, maps, meeting notes, and finally a single line: target must be removed without making a martyr. The suitcase closed with a soft thud, but its echo would ring for years. 16 suitcases, and this last one had held the darkest truth of all. They hadn't just stolen gold, they had rewritten history, controlled it, buried it, until tonight. Traore looked out the fogged glass windows. The sun was beginning to rise. "We waited 36 years for this," he said, then turned to Dubois. "And you will carry this story back. Every document, every page, not for negotiations, not for approval, but so that those who ordered this know it failed. Africa is no longer sleeping." Traore didn't rest, he didn't celebrate, he turned to his team. "Arrest every name on the list. Freeze their accounts, sir. Search their homes." Cabaret nodded. Aminata took notes. Dio picked up the phone. Justice would not wait. By 6 a.m., the national broadcaster paused its regular schedule. A camera turned on, and there was Traore. Behind him, lined up in perfect order, were all 16 suitcases. He faced the nation. No teleprompter, no speechwriters, just the truth. "Last night," he began, "we discovered something terrible, but something we must all see." And one by one he opened each suitcase again. He showed the documents, the gold, the cash, the poisons, the weapons. Nothing was hidden. For 2 full hours, the country watched in silence. But by the end, it wasn't silence anymore. People flooded the streets, flags waved, songs were sung. The 16 suitcases were no longer evidence. They were a symbol of awakening, of courage, of a future claimed. In Mali, the president called an emergency session. All French contracts were frozen. In Niger, thousands chanted in the streets, "We want our 16 suitcases too." In Paris, panic. Diplomats scrambled. News anchors debated. The president raged, but one advisor warned, the world saw everything. At the United Nations, the ambassador from Burkina Faso stood. He held up a file. "This is what they did. You speak of law. We speak of truth." Applause from some, silence from others. Africa was no longer in the shadows. And Traore? He was already working a school in every village, clinics in every town, a museum to house the suitcases, because history had been stolen. But now it was theirs again. Months passed, but the memory didn't fade. Burkina Faso didn't just recover, it redefined itself. The 16 suitcases were placed in a special hall. A museum was built around them, not to glorify the scandal, but to remember the resistance. Every school took trips to visit it. Teachers stood in front of glass displays. This one carried stolen gold, they'd say, and this one. This held the assassination plan for a president. Children listened, eyes wide, not in fear, in pride, because this wasn't a story of victimhood. It was a story of defiance, of truth, of unity. Outside the museum, a small plaque was mounted. It read, 16 suitcases, 16 secrets, but one future, ours. Economically, Burkina Faso began to rise. Gold profits returned to the people. Villages received electricity, hospitals were stocked, and new leaders emerged, young, educated, fearless, inspired by what they'd seen. Traore rarely spoke of the night. Again, when asked, he'd simply say, "I opened them, but the people were the ones who carried them forward." One afternoon, a girl stood before the museum case with her mother. She stared at the gold, then whispered, "Mom, is this really ours now?" Her mother smiled. "Yes, forever." And the little girl smiled too, because she knew she finally had something. Country had waited generations for a future, a real one, a free one, born not just from struggle, but from truth unpacked 16 times over.